You're listening to In IKWT Trust for the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. You can find the team on our Twitter at ANYPodcast or on our website, www.alwaysnextyearpodcast.com. And now, to bring us in, the Jackdaws.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and so jig over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son, still happy life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
Hello and welcome to a more than frustrated version of In IKWT Trust here at the Always Next Year Podcast Studio Network. I am your host, Shane. I'm hosting this one solo because you asked for it. I'm hosting this one 2 days early because you asked for it. So the Philadelphia Phillies are a dumpster fire right now. They are crashing and burning, and because so much negativity is surrounding this team and organization right now, everyone has their own source of frustration. Everyone has that blue checkmark Twitter user who is helping formulate their opinion. And because no one anymore is a critical thinker these days on their own, they completely rely on the things that other people see that they trust or have been trusting, no matter how right nor wrong they may be. And that becomes their opinion, which means we are an illogical fan base and an irrational fan base, and one that is very, very unfreaking educated. So, because I go against the grain from a lot of that, my philosophies and my thought processes have been significantly different than what you were getting on Twitter. And for that, you've attacked me. Whether it be in the open forum, which I respect, that is 100% fine. If you're sending me messages on my DM because you can't handle the open forum of Twitter and being told that you're wrong or being told that someone might think differently than you, I would suggest getting off Twitter and social media in the first place. This is what is wrong with society today. Media sucks. Social media is awful. I wouldn't have it if I didn't have to have it for work here. If you send us in emails, most of you are sending those in because you do not have a Twitter. I would recommend, if you have the patience for it, to get a Twitter, because a lot of you guys brought in really, really good points. If you do not have the patience for it, I respect the hell out of you and stay off social media. It's a dark, dark, dark place. But I think differently. And right now, a lot of our users, that sounds terrible. A lot of our followers and listeners, are not 100% on board with me. And I gotta say, I'm cool with it. And you know why I'm cool with it? Because I'm an adult. Because if you think differently and something makes you feel a particular way, who in the hell am I to tell you that's wrong? All I would then ask for you is to present your side with information that is even remotely fact-based to support how you feel. Maybe it makes me look at things a little bit different. Some of the questions and responses that we got in emails for this particular segment made me look at things a little bit different. I'm not going to say I agree with them. I didn't. But I had to look at things differently for another week. What is wrong with that? Not everything is politics. Not everything needs to be banned from normal conversation because people can't handle themselves having differing opinions from the person next to them. Grow up. It's okay. We don't all have to think the same. That's boring. So, before we get 100% into this very quick segment here, a quick word from our sponsor. It's Just Food in Buckingham Green Shopping Center in Bucks County, PA. It is just above Peddler's Village if you are familiar with the area. They do catered events such as weddings, graduation parties, anniversaries, different things like that. They are delicious. They're incredibly flexible with their menu. They're very creative with their menu. So if you have a particular palate, they will work with you to find a menu that really suits you and suits your party and suits whatever you're going for in that particular evening or afternoon. They also have a more simplified menu. So if you're looking for just sandwiches and sliders and appetizers and things of that sort, they can certainly do that too. We had a pool party for Stephanie's family 2 summers ago. They catered that. It was just a bunch of finger food and apps, and everything was delicious. And I could not recommend these guys more. So Rob over there at Just Food, like I said, he will work with you tirelessly to find a menu that is exactly as that you look for. Their prices are also very, very competitive. So if you ever want to stop in, they are again in the Buckingham Green Shopping Center in Bucks County, PA, right above Peddler's Village there. So if you ever do stop in-store location, ask for Rob. Tell him Shane from AMYP sent you. Rob will make you lunch, and I promise you will love it. Whether it is something just as simple as a pulled pork sandwich that I had last week, whether you're getting some Southern-styled chicken, it doesn't matter. Whatever you're going to get, you're going to love. He'll also treat you to a side and different things like that as well. So it is 215-794-FOOD. That's 215-794-3663. Treat yourself. Take it home. Now, getting into this Philadelphia Phillies debate and arguments and the philosophies as to why we believe different things are wrong. Right now, everything is heightened. When you are as bad as the Philadelphia Phillies are playing, everything becomes heightened. 7 straight losses. They've lost 11 of the last 13 and 16 of the last 22. For as ice cold as they have been, the Braves have been equally as white hot. When you put that together, you get a enormous swing in the divisional power or divisional standings. So on May 29th, the Philadelphia Phillies had a 3.5 game lead in the division. Spent all but 2 days of the active season in first place. And now, less than a month later, 25 days later, they're 6.5 games back from Atlanta in the division. Now, for those of you who are bad at math, that's a 10-game difference in the division in a matter of 2.5, 3.5 weeks, whatever it was. That is impossibly bad. But one thing it also is unrealistic to believe that both of these patterns will remain. The Philadelphia Phillies, no matter how much they have to figure out with the holes that they have, they will not stay this bad for this long. There's entirely too much talent there for one or two of those pieces to not begin to click at the same time. They will not be this bad, and the Braves will not be that good. The Braves also have been ridiculously healthy this year, outside of their rotation early in the season. But since they have all come back, they're looking pretty good. Now, it's unrealistic to sit there and expect that both of those circumstances are going to continue to ride out exactly as they are right now. It's impossible. Not impossible, but it's improbable. So you have to look at different things right now as to say, when it is a 162-game season, anything can change in a matter of a moment. Our season seemingly has changed since Andrew McCutchen went down with an ACL injury on a freak accident. That's one thing. That one thing could happen to the Braves as well. One pitcher could forget how to throw strikes. You don't know. So not everything is going to remain as bad as it is right now. It could get better. Honestly, maybe it could get worse. I sincerely doubt it, but for the argument, it could get better or much worse. We don't know. So one thing that happens when your team is this bad for this stretch of time, and we've seen such a severe change in the standings, is everyone begins to point the finger at the things or the people that they believe are most liable for, or most responsible for this kind of mid-season collapse. Some people believe it's the manager, Gabe Kapler. That is not me, and that is why we're having this segment right now. Other people believe that it is Klentak for not making trades right now. I believe Klentak was more at fault in the offseason than he is right now. Other people think that it's the players. That's a very smart take. Most people will not take that or will not have that, but at the end of the day, it's true. Some people don't really have an actual opinion, and they've already just jumped off the bandwagon. So I'm going to break it down for you now as to why I personally believe that Gabe Kapler, while is not perfect, is amongst the least of your concerns, or should be amongst the least of your concerns for the collapse right now, the midseason collapse of the Philadelphia Phillies. So we put out a poll on the ANYP Twitter account, which is at ANY Podcast, if you ever want to follow us, which you already should be doing in the first place. Where does Kapler fall? Where does Gabe Kapler fall in your personal list of things to specifically bring blame to the Philadelphia Phillies and their midseason struggles? Where does he fall? Is he the problem? Is he top 3? Is he 5 through 10 on your list, or is he not on your list at all? So here are the responses that we got. 21% of people said that he is the sole problem. that to me shows very, very just shallow thinking. And you're just looking as, I actually probably assume that the 21% of people who sat there and stated Gabe Kapler is the sole problem all work in customer service. And when a store fails of any kind, you can't or don't fire an entire staff and keep a store manager, right? So the easier thing is to sit there and say, we're going to move the GM or the store manager, and we're just going to try to get a new person in here that forces people to kind of reset. And there's nothing terribly wrong with that logic in that scenario. I don't necessarily think it crosses over to sports, but I do genuinely believe that the 21% of people who voted that he is the problem probably are working or have worked very recently in customer service. And that is really all I can think of as to why anyone would believe that he is the only goddamn problem. That's insanity to me. Not saying you're wrong. You can have that opinion if you want. It's just strange to have it. 21% of the people said that he is top 3 on their list. Now, I think that's fair. I would not put him there in that top 3. But if you're going to look and kind of categorize different things as it's the offense, or it's the pitching, or it's the coaching and execs. Like, if you're just going to huge generalizations in terms of your personal categories, I can see where that 21% comes from there, if that's how they're thinking. 30%, which got the most votes here, 30% stated that he was somewhere between 5 and 10, which again, I think is very fair. If you even branch out just slightly in terms of the generalization of your list and you start refining certain things, even if you're separating just starting pitching and bullpen pitching, you've added another thing there, another place for Kapler to fall behind on that list. So I do think between 5 and 10 is fair. 28% of people voted how I voted and said that he is not the problem. He is not on my list yet. So one thing that you should notice there are the percentage breakdowns are as follows: 21%, 21%, 30%, 28%. For 4 choices, that's kind of even. Like, obviously you can get closer, but there's no real definitive, yes, this is the problem. No, this is the problem. No, that's the problem. It's everything right now. People don't know where to point the finger. So now they just go to, in my opinion, what they don't understand. And the easiest thing is to say, I don't understand what Gabe Kapler is doing, or I don't understand this new baseball. I don't understand why the team with this much talent is failing to execute on the field. It must be Kapler. It's easy to blame the thing that you don't understand. I think that's where a lot of that comes from. So one of the questions, I'm hitting the microphone now, my bad. One of the questions that we got wasn't so much of a question. It was more of they're demanding me to do this, which is fine. You couldn't give me 2 legitimate set of circumstances that you would place blame on before Gabe Kapler. And this was a hold my beer moment, because I could rip off 10, 12 things immediately before I would ever get to Gabe Kapler on my personal list. So I told the person that sent this in that I would give a handful of them on the show and a slight kind of look into why I put those things there. So first thing is first is in the offseason, Matt Klentak, John Middleton, they did an excellent job of bringing in offensive talent, right? They made some difficult decisions in trades. They made some higher dollar signings than I think most people would have thought was right at the time. So they obviously bringing in Bryce Harper to the, at the time, largest contract in baseball history, changes the face of your franchise for the next 13 seasons. That was huge. They traded their top pitching prospect and someone who has been compared to Pedro Martinez in Sixto Sanchez in order to acquire their catcher for this period of time, the best two-way catcher in baseball, in JT Realmuto. They traded their former organizational top prospect in shortstop JP Crawford and last year's punching bag Carlos Santana over to get a more win-now-ready type of shortstop, a more polished shortstop in Gene Segura. They signed a former MVP out in left field in Andrew McCutchen, who to the point of his injury was the most important and probably most consistent and best Philadelphia Philly on the team. They added Robertson, was the only thing outside of that they went and did to the bullpen. They didn't address starting pitching. So that for me is circumstance number one that Gabe Kapler should have never had to deal with. If you logically think about it, they were going into this season thinking Aaron Nola's our guaranteed ace. I think it would have been unrealistic to say I think he's going to repeat a Cy Young season, but he will be at least an ace pitcher for us. Well, that hasn't worked out. You put all your eggs in that particular thing, knowing every 5 days, that's the pitcher we can count on. Beyond that, you legitimately had 4 wild cards. Last year, Jake Arrieta had an up-and-down season, but it came out that he was pitching with a torn meniscus, and he pitched without a spring training. So you didn't really know what you were going to get out of Jake Arrieta this year. We didn't know what kind of pitcher he was going to be. Wild card. Nick Pivetta, while I am a huge fan, and people all around baseball believe that he is destined or was destined for a breakout season this year, he had a very strong spring training, flashed in plus miles per hour on his fastball compared to what he had last year. His spin rate was insane on that curveball. You still didn't fully know. You were just banking on that to work out. Wild card. Vince Velasquez in that experiment, no matter how you slice that up, that is a wild card. That is, honestly, it's worse than a wild card. That's moronic to go into this season again with Vince Velasquez in the rotation. And then you had Zach Eflin, who is like the least sexiest pitcher I've ever seen that is actually good. Like he's just a guy, but for whatever reason he works. And I would say that of the wild cards, he was like the least wild cardy. So like you had at least 3.5 pitchers that you said, shit, I hope it works out. That's not Gabe Kapler's fault. What can he do with that rotation? What can he do if Jake Arrieta goes out and allows home runs every single time out? What can he do if Aaron Nola is no longer the ace that he was last year and he's having that really bad slump season? Not unlike Hamels in 2009 after the World Series run. Those are the 2 pitchers that you theoretically you should be leaning on, the veteran and your ace. And then Nick Pivetta has to get sent down. Vince Velasquez gets kicked out the rotation, then brought back in, then kicked out again, then brought back in. You have to pitch Cole Irvin, who should never be in the major leagues fucking ever. You have to pitch Jared Eichhoff, and no matter how much I love him and believe that if this was still the late 90s, early 2000s, he would probably be one hell of a pitcher, but this is just not what baseball is anymore. You can't win with an 88-mile-an-hour fastball and not be perfect with your location and perfect with all 4 of your pitches, and he just isn't, so he got lit the hell up. How is this Kapler's problem? That to me is number 1. Easy. So you've asked me for 2. I gave you 1 immediately. Number 2. Why should Gabe Kapler had to have prepared for his center fielder to be a not so good human being and find himself on the commissioner's list? You hear that? That's a circumstance that your manager should never have had to deal with. Odubel Herrera was this organization's best player for 3 years. He was the 3-hole hitter. He hit near 300 and he always had that potential to be a consistent 300 hitter. He had plus pop. He played a decent center field, all but 1 year here. He was supposed to be solidifying the back end, the bottom half of our order. Our former best player. He was supposed to be manning center field 160 plus games a year, and he's not there. Not for anything that he did on the field, not that he was having a good season, let's not pretend like he was, but regardless, Gabe Kapler has now had to use Adam Hazley, who had to get fast-tracked to the major leagues, which is unbelievable. Then he gets hurt. Andrew McCutchen had to play center field. He was 32. He can't play center field every day anymore. Roman Quinn is glass, and he's going to have to play center field now. Scott Kingery is not a center fielder. He has played everywhere outside of the position that he truly is. You're making that job impossible for Gabe Kapler. Night in and night out, you have a hole out there in center field or at third base, depending on where you go with things. That's impossible. That's 2 circumstances he should have never had to have dealt with. The Andrew McCutchen ACL thing. You can't bank on a guy having that type of a freak injury. Honestly, for all of my issues with Klentak right now and the way that the lack of attention towards pitching and the incomplete roster as it was, and trusting that Mike Franco, which is another point I have in a moment, was going to be, a baseball player. They made very smart offseason decisions in terms of personnel added. They added Andrew McCutchen over Brantley because Andrew McCutchen had a long-standing track record of being a very healthy baseball player. Every year he plays more than 150, 55 games. Well, that bit him in the ass. Brantley's over there raking on his way to an All-Star game, and Andrew McCutchen tore his ACL in a very freak incident. They made the right decision. Shit just happens. That's something that Gabe Kapler should not have had to have worried about. And when he does go down, theoretically, we had a very crowded outfield to start this season. We had Bryce Harper, Odubel Herrera, Andrew McCutchen, Nick Williams, who people in Philadelphia love, even though he's a dog shit baseball player, Aaron Altair, who people in Philadelphia were very split on, either you loved him or loathed him, Roman Quinn, and then Adam Hazley was around the corner. Everyone's gone. We have Bryce Harper left. Roman Quinn is out there manning it right now, but it's going to be Adam Hazley when he comes back. Jay Bruce had to been acquired by a trade. These are things that Gabe Kapler should have never had to have dealt with. Never. If Nick Williams was half the baseball player that Philadelphia Phillies fans believe him to be, because he is dog shit, he could be out there right now adding some stability to the outfield and to the lineup. But he can't. Because he's terrible. So Kutch's ACL, that's the third one. 7 different bullpen pitchers find their way on the IL. Now this is kind of going back towards Klentak and failing to address the starting pitching. When your starting pitching has been as bad and as inconsistent as the Philadelphia Phillies are, or has been, your bullpen is going to be taxed that much more. So you do have to throw guys like Adam Morgan, Pat Neshek, wow, who the hell else are they really throwing out there all the time? Alvarez is getting the ball a lot right now. Victor Arano, when he was healthy, they've had to use their pen far more than they needed to. And the way that they're winning baseball games during that period of time where they were in first place was not a sustainable formula. They were relying on a bullpen that was broken to be damn near perfect every single night. And for a while they were a top third in the league bullpen, and it was just not sustainable when you look at guys who are not conditioned to be what baseball pitchers used to be. Like, these guys can't throw 5 days a week. It just doesn't work. They got to throw 2 or 3 days a week. And we had to push that. We had to throw 4 or 5 times a week, and it just doesn't always work. And then bodies break down. Did you want them to win baseball games? Or did you want us to attempt to save relievers and hope to God people came back healthy? Like, this is a no-win situation for Kapler. So that's another thing. Mike Franco, I don't really think we need to talk about it. The organization made a mistake. They were banking on Franco to be even a remotely serviceable baseball player at third base, defensively and in the bottom half of the order. And he started the season hot, and you saw how important that was for the Phillies to have that productivity and production there. And then he went back to being, Michael Franco, but the worst version of Franco I've ever seen. I think he's hitting 204 right now. That hurts. When you don't go out there and get a Mike Moustakas who is hitting over 300 with 20-some home runs and 50-some RBI, like, you made a mistake. That is something that Kapler should not have had to go into the season with a question mark at third base, now having to deal with a question mark in center field, a question mark in left field, because Jay Bruce should platoon. He should not be an everyday player. He should honestly be a DH, but you're forcing things to move all around right now. And these are circumstances he should not have ever had to have dealt with. Some other things that he should not have had to deal with, and these are about specific players that should have never had to be talked about in this light. Gene Segura is 75 points off his batting average from this point last season. We got Gene Segura for his hit tool, for his contact tool, because he rarely struck out, constantly put the ball in play, always on base, and utilized the entire field. Well, he's striking out a ton. He looks lost at the plate, and his average it's not in the tank, but when you look at where it was, it's in the freaking tank. He was hitting 330 and he's down to under 270. That's not a small fall. This is a guy who hits atop the order. It takes a bit of a slump to get yourself down there. So, and he has been starting to get a hit here, and I would think he's actually in a hitting streak right now. I have to check back on some of my notes, but he's still not the Gene Segura that we expected. And if you took the 3-year average of his previous 3 seasons in Philadelphia up to this point, he is 42 points off of that. This is a guy that we banked on hitting over 300, sitting in the 2-hole or leadoff spot, wherever they chose to use him, that would constantly move runners over and constantly be on base himself in prime RBI spots for those who followed, like Harper, Hoskins, and Romuto. And it hasn't worked out. That's not something Gabe Kapler needed or should have had to have worried about. Now, he has done everything in his power to get Gene going. They've moved him from 2 to 3. They've moved him to leadoff here and there. I think at one point they put him in the 5-hole. He actually might be hitting 5th tonight. I can't remember. They have moved him around and done what they can to try to jumpstart him. They've changed who's in front and behind him. Nothing's worked. But this is something that Kapler is attempting to work through. So I don't think you can blame Cap for a player not being exactly as they have been for their entire career. JT Realmuto acquiring the best two-way catcher in the game. He is 20 points off his average, 20 points off his on-base percentage, and 30 points off his slugging percentage. Now, that's not a huge drop in some of those categories. But when you take a look at what we acquired and what we gave up, it's hard to not be discouraged. It's hard to sit there and say, man, you left that cavernous park out there in Miami to come to Citizens Bank Park, and you're hitting 260 with 10 home runs and like 25, 35 RBI, whatever it is. Come on now. That if that is what you were expecting from JT, I would say you're lying. When we acquired JT, we were expecting 275, 280. We were expecting 15, 20 home runs by the All-Star break. We were expecting really big things from this guy. And it hasn't happened. And when he's your 5-hole hitter, that's a serious issue. So I don't know whether it's Maley. I don't know whether it's just, adjusting to the market such as Philadelphia. But JT has not been what we expected him to be. Not been what we acquired him to be. That's a problem. Franco last year, we touched on a little bit. He hit 270 last year. I have no idea how he did it. I think it was specifically that 6 to 8 week stretch he went on after the All-Star break where he just hit the shit out of the baseball. But 270 last year, nevertheless, he's hitting 204 this year. Almost every meaningful stat that he put together in the first 20 games of the season has done jack shit since. So Michael Franco is a black hole over there at third base, and that's a real big problem. Kapler has done everything he can. He's had him in the 8 spot, which I think is perfect for him if he's going to be there because it forces him to not be a baseball idiot like Michael Franco is. They've had to move him up because of different circumstances, whether it be 6 or 7. They've moved him up to 5. I think twice this year they even had to hit him in the 4 spot, if I'm not mistaken. I can't remember offhand. But he's been moved around all over the place, and it's just not working out. So nothing Kapler can do with this guy is going to work because Michael Franco, at the end of all days, is a dog shit baseball player. 2 really glaring things right now is the fact that Harper and Hoskins are 64th and 42nd, respectively, in all of baseball in home runs. I don't know how that's possible in Citizens Bank Park with those 2 hitters. If you would have told me that 70-some games into the season that our 3-4 hitters would combine for 29 home runs, I would have laughed in your face. I would have said, well, which one has 29 and who got hurt? That's impossible to me. So right now, Harper has 13 home runs and Hoskins has 16. Gabe Kapler could not have possibly foreseen his power hitters who have been known their entire careers, one obviously more sustained than the other. But that's something he shouldn't have to worry about. Putting 3-4 as Harper Hoskins and then 5 with Romuto. I mean, we went into the season thinking this was going to be one of the most formidable lineups in all of baseball, especially, or at the very least in the NL. It's not happening. And that's what happens when you lose Odubel. That's what happens when Cesar and Segura go cold. It's what happens when you lose your leadoff man in Andrew McCutchen. It's what happens when Rhys Hoskins' streakiness is at an all-time worst. It's what happens when Harper is, and I think Harper's having a fine season. It's just not the superstar-esque season that we would have grown to expect. But he's having a fine season, but there isn't any real launch. Jack Fritz tweeted out and said this is the lowest launch angle of his career. That's not great in a ballpark that is as small as Citizens Bank Park that plays in the alleys as well as it does for its hitters. Bryce Harper should be raking with power. And he's a doubles hitter right now. He's like a, 1990s version of a baseball player who's a stud. This isn't what baseball is today. So he's going to have to find lift again in order for this fan base to get excited about Bryce Harper again. But so many different things sit here, and you look at it, and there are so many different areas that Gabe Kapler falls behind. And in each of the ones I've mentioned, Gabe Kapler has fallen behind on that list for me, and he is not quite as high for me as he is on other people. Now, here's the most interesting thing. People hate in Philadelphia analytics. It's like a swear word. I went on a rant about that a couple weeks ago on In Cap We Trust. They loathe analytics, and I think they loathe it because they don't understand it, which is fine. If you don't understand it and you don't wish to understand it, I just wish you wouldn't speak on it. I wish you wouldn't use that as your reason for not liking someone or not thinking that someone is a good manager or a good player or a good coach or whatever it may be. If you want to have a real opinion on something, please educate yourself on what you're speaking on is first and foremost for me. But here's the funny thing. The people who loathe analytics and who sit there and rip Gabe Kapler because he's this new wave of baseball and he's analytics this and analytics that, the note card says this, the spreadsheet says that, this is how I'm going to manage, blah, blah, blah. You need to get this guy the hell out of here and bring in Joe Girardi. He's sitting there. He's just waiting. You're an idiot. I'm sorry. You're an idiot. I don't understand where you can find this is a perfect example. So if you formulate all of your opinions based on someone else's thought, who are you? Like, what is your identity as a human? Can you not critically think and come to decisions on your own? I genuinely need to know that answer. It's impossible to me. If you can sit here and state, I hate analytics, I hate the new baseball, I wish it were the way it used to be, guys like Charlie Manuel and Larry Boa, even if you want to throw Pete McCannon in there, like whatever, you know, that's the baseball I love. We need to get this new guy out of here, Gabe Kapler, and his analytics and note cards, and let's bring in Girardi, like the poster boy for analytics in baseball. Come on. Google search for 5 minutes who Girardi is, what his philosophy is, how much he adheres to what analytical information has brought to this game. He literally is an index card manager. And I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It certainly isn't. This is what baseball is today, but you're asking to remove someone and you hate someone so severely for the very same reasons that you're bringing in, so your personal choice is to bring someone in who's going to be the same, if not a higher version or a more analytically driven version of the person you loathe? How dumb are you? How stupid can you be? I just don't get it. So that's what I'm saying. So when you listen to my show, when you listen to any of our shows here at AMYP, like we provide you with information and our particular takes and opinions on things. How do they make you feel? Watch these games. Watch it from a different perspective now that you've gained a different view on anything that you've heard here on our show or WIP or that you've read on Twitter, or that you've read in the newspaper or in magazines or what have you. Watch the game for yourself after hearing some of these opinions and these takes and these philosophies and ways of thinking, and then formulate your own opinion based on what it is that you see. It's not hard. It is just be a critical thinker, be a human being. Don't just sit here and just be, a walking around human version of Angelo Cataldi, just because he's loud, he's correct in your mind. That's wrong, man. Don't be an idiot. Be even remotely educated about the things that you talk about. Don't have opinions that are just so short-sighted. It's moronic. I know I had more to talk about today, but we're going to keep this one short. I actually think that we may be able to squeeze in the normal and regularly scheduled In Cap We Trust later this week. But tonight, Rob and I are going to Reading, which will be awesome. So for those of you guys who did not realize or have not heard, Alec Bohm, the organization's top fielding prospect, position player prospect, has been promoted 3 days ago, I want to say. This is his first series that's like kind of close to the Philadelphia area at this point. So they're in Trenton tonight, facing the Trenton Thunder. So Rob and I are going to go there. So we'll have different videos of him. We'll give you guys a little bit of what we see. From him, from Moniak, from I actually think Hazley's going to be there as well, on a, like a rehab assignment type of thing. We'll talk a little bit about Cornelius Randolph. He is someone who I was so excited for when we drafted, and man, I was wrong. So I just keep hoping that it's going to click for him someday. I don't know if it will, but we will certainly see. But we'll have a lot of different reports on the AA team and some of the prospects in the Philadelphia Phillies organization tonight. We'll have those on Twitter tonight. We'll have them the next day as well. Philadelphia Phillies tonight have Steven Matz. They're facing Steven Matz, which is perfect. So long as we can do what we did, I think the first time we faced him this season, or he didn't record a single out, that's perfect. The Mets are a dumpster fire too, for like a myriad of different reasons. So like, this is just two really, really just bad baseball clubs going head to head tonight. So I hope to God that the Philadelphia Phillies get it. Hold on here. So I'll state this. I think that if the Philadelphia Phillies win tonight, that they're about to go on a pretty absurd hot stretch to kind of level out the last 28, 25 days, whatever it's been, where they lost 10 games in the division, or 10 games in the divisional standings. So I think they're going to rip Mets. We have Eflin on the mound, who's been our best pitcher. So it would not shock me if Eflin goes 6, 7 innings, 8 innings and gives up 1 or 2 runs. Also would not shock me if he goes like 5 innings and gets freaking lit up, because that would make sense in Philadelphia right now. But I do think the offense is going to come and they're going to rake. It's supposed to be fairly humid out tonight again. So it should be, if they can't get their bats going today, I'd be concerned. So, more concerned than I already am. So that'll be it for this kind of, not an emergency pod, but responsive pod to those who reached out to me or to any of the AMYP members here. But we will try to have an additional segment, me and Rob, later this week on our normally scheduled recording days here. But that'll be it. Be sure to follow us on Twitter. It's at AMY Podcast. You can follow me, the host of IKWT, at Shane_Mead. I also host TJ's One of Us. I host Crossing Borders with AMYP, and I co-host on Whiskey Ramble, Kelly Green Hour occasionally, and Disciples of Ed occasionally as well. So you can hear me on just about every segment that we have here. Make sure to rate and review the podcast and validate all of our life decisions, because holy hell, we've been stuck at 18 reviews for quite some time now, starting to think that the same people listen to our shows over and over and over again, which means we are not doing our job and reaching out to more people. But be sure to rate and review us. If you have enjoyed any of our segments whatsoever, grab your coworkers' phones, your spouse's phones, your friends, families, no matter who it is, strangers in restaurants, grab their phone, go to the podcast app, quickly download us, and make their lives significantly better. We'd appreciate it. That'll be it for IKWT here at the Always Next Year podcast. I am Shane. We'll see you guys later in the week.
A fighting man I used to be, revered and feared through Killarney. Now I'm back to hitching with the wind. But if Mickey Flynn should ever find me, I'll throw me caution all behind me and square off on that son of a bitch again. He cracked open a river too, he beat me Sunday through and through, and such over my unconscious frame. I won me healthy sheriff fights, well lucky son still had me life since Mickey Flynn beat me dumb and lame.
This has been a production of the Always Next Year Podcast Network. You can subscribe to our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, Spreaker, and SoundCloud. Please also remember to rate and review this podcast to validate our members' life choices. We appreciate it. This is AMYP, signing off.